Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 16 of the Beer Enthusiasts. Houblon Chouffe, IPA, all the way from Belgium. As they call it, an IPA triple beer.
Yeah,
It's
right.
it's like three beers. It's like
What?
3% beers all in one.
Yeah, triple everything, even triple the American attitude. Even this is a fun one. You don't really see Belgian IPA. You kind of.
Right.
It's funny that the beer judge certification program, not funny, but they separate out white IPA and Belgian IPA,
Yeah, very, very
um,
interesting.
and it makes some sense. But this one's definitely kind of the forerunner of
Yeah,
Belgian IPA, it seems.
no doubt.
I do know that Houblon Chouffe glassware exists, but I need more glassware. Like I need very few things, so I went with Allagash.
I actually had a really funny experience. One of our friends, when Nikki, my spouse, was with us last night, she was like, "How many pieces of glassware do you have?" And they were like, "Oh, I probably have like 500." And she was like, "All right, yours is not nearly your habit is not nearly as bad." And my response was, "I'm really glad this interaction happened."
Yeah, I'm glad you had me pay that guy to say that.
Yeah, just as I slip about 20. Yeah. Oh gosh. All right.
Oh,
I know it's I
it
kind of just
looks
looked for like the widest mouthed tulip I could find in the collection for this one.
it
So
looks so
yeah,
good.
yeah. Recipe for this: 9% ABV, and not from Ublon's website, but from other sources. It seems like it's floating, just under 50 IBUs, and then it seems like there's three different kinds of hops. For some reason, I thought it was on the back of the bottle, but I looked at the bottle and it's not there, and I can't remember where I saw it. But I feel like the three that they use, and I've seen it before, and I could be wrong. If anybody does know, please correct me. But I'm pretty sure it's Tomahawk, Saz or Jatek, and Amarillo. I'm pretty sure those are the three hops that are in here. Likely Tomahawk that's a pretty common bittering hop, so that's likely what that's for. And then lots of the um, Saz and Aroma for aromatics. And then the only other thing they say is that there's barley malt, and by judging by the you know color, this is going to be like um, a good amount of Pilsner malt.
Yeah, or even just kind of like a two row, just a very lightly kilned kind of two row. It
Yeah,
does have when you look at it, it's quite pale. My lighting is not like super bright, so if you're watching, it's even more pale than what you see right now.
right.
Um, but yeah, like yellow with like kind of an orange accent to it, a light orange accent.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's funny. I mean, mine's too cold. I poured it quite cold, but the foam just still won't quit. It's like,
Yep. Yeah, it's just kind of it's even though it's kind of started tapering down, the middle part is just becoming more and more cloud like, meringue like. It's almost got this like foam like terrain that's
yeah,
kind of forming in different places. It's a wonderful sight to see. Definitely one of the pros of sensory when it comes to Belgian beer like this. But yeah, fluffy white foam, great lacing, great retention, pretty clear. Not the most clear beer in the world, but average clarity for a beer like this. You gave us a great description on the color. What do we get on the nose here?
well, to me, I get a lot of kind of yeasty character first. Some of that, a little bit clovey, a little bit white pepper to me, a little bit of like pink peppercorn type
Yeah, pink
aroma,
peppercorn's good.
and then it's citrus for days on top of that. To me, it's like an orange oil, orange pith, mildly grapefruity.
Yeah, I get like lemon pepper, lemon zest. Get a little bit of like a pear, like a candied pear, might be an ester.
Yeah, and there's a really I don't know how to describe the floral aroma, but it's like an ethanol aroma. It's not harsh. It's
Hmm.
just like I can smell that this is a strong
Yeah,
beer.
yeah, yeah. 9%. That's gonna be a thing.
Mm. Okay, I got to dive in.
Surprisingly, for what they say the IBU count is, and um, how phenolic this potentially is, and how dry it is, it's pretty. It's not. I wouldn't say this is like an assertive bitterness. This is like quite firm, but not quite in the like American strong ale realm.
It really, yeah, but it does to me, and obviously every bottle is different, and I don't know what the ages are. I didn't even look. It's mine says
Yeah, what's your
10
best
twenty twenty
before?
four.
Yeah, mine says 6/2024, so mine might be
So
a
yours
little
is
bit.
definitely older.
Yep.
I don't know what their best by period is. If it's got to be like 18 months or more because well, I obviously didn't get this as fresh as if mine's 10/24. It's not a year. We didn't get this the same month that it was
Yeah, yeah.
bottled, I don't think.
Yep.
But at any rate, what I wanted to say about the quality of the bitterness was it's kind of like through the first two-thirds of the beer, it seems, like you said, to me, not extremely assertive. It's super well integrated, kind of like goes step for step with that phenolic character. And then
Mhm.
mine has a very old school bitter linger that
Yeah,
kind of puts the jets on at the very end. You're kind of like all the way done with the beer, and then you just have this wash of bitterness sitting with you.
yeah. I think in the linger, I think I can get behind that there's a lingering bitterness for sure. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and it's
it's
very
extremely it's extremely dry. Hmm.
yeah. You just keep wanting to like run your tongue across all the parts of your mouth. It's lingering in very very pleasant ways. You almost are just required to keep going back in for a sip, even though it's that heavy. You're just like, oh, I need to compound this flavor that I'm getting.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, and it's very a lot of the aroma rings true. I get that a little bit more of that lemon pepper kind of thing that you were talking about, but it's less like a fresh lemon and more like a lemon oil to me. Um, Very pithy citrus type
Hmm.
fruits,
Yeah,
grapefruit, even just pithy orange peels, like expressing orange oils over a cocktail, for example. And then the phenolic character is quite complex, I think. I mean, I think
I
that's
agree.
where white IPA diverges from Belgian IPA, if there is a hard line, is there is fermentation character in most white IPAs. They're kind of like, think of those as a marriage between Belgian style wit beer and American IPA, and this is more of a marriage between either saison or Belgian triple and American IPA. And so it makes sense to me that this has even more yeast character to it, and it's still very, um, yeah, white pepper, black pepper, clove, peppercorns, very very pleasant. That's kind of a cool, um, yeah, a lot of black pepper, a lot of citrus, very very tasty.
Yeah, yeah. The ethanol in the finish, along with the hops, you're right. It's kind of floral. It's giving it this kind of like orange blossom, orange liqueur, limoncello, kind of impression to it. And I think also that lingers as well. And I think that definitely kind of brings it, kind of it starts with that, and then once that, like, kind of like what you said, once that kind of goes away, then you kind of all of a sudden you're like, now the bitterness is starting to build too. So there's not really a break from this sucker.
No, this is not a beer you get a break from. You get a break like the next day. You have this beer and then you can be done with it the next day.
Yeah.
But you know what else it reminds me of when you said that the aroma is kind of like a liqueur. It's like either a citrus liqueur, like an orange or a grapefruit liqueur, or like a bitter digestif or an aperitif, and this would be a beer that you could have just by itself as an aperitif. It's just got so much going on that you'd be more than within your license to just kind of sit with this one and really enjoy it as a after meal kind of thing. But if I know my vintage beer enthusiasts, I think we've got some good pairing ideas too. So
Yeah. Well, I think with something that's got this much going on that we've kind of talked about in sensory, I think this is a good beer to walk through a little bit and really, because I think there's a lot to work with, but I also think there's like a couple of like there's a couple of things that you could step into that could lead you down a poor path, because there's a lot of things that you're working with here, or lacking even. Lack of residual sweetness kind of pushes you away from certain dishes. High bitterness, high level of phenolic character. I would even say high levels of these kinds of hop characteristics. Along with that, I wasn't sure how hoppy this was going to be. I've had it before, like, because we just had it in a blind tasting, and it didn't seem that hoppy at all, and also didn't seem all that as phenolic as this either. It seemed very ester forward, but I've had others where it seemed very hop forward, and this seems very phenolic forward. Um,
mhm.
so obviously, we're not getting these ridiculously fresh, so sometimes we're just kind of left to the devices of whatever the bottle's going to give us after something like that. So I might kind of switch around some of the stuff I had in mind, but like many Belgian brewery websites, when it comes to this and food, it's incredible. You should visit their website. They've got tons of food pairing options. They've got ways to use it in cooking, with a dish, and so would be remiss to not mention that they have a lobster bisque with a Rui sauce as one of their suggestions for this. Um, but with all those things in mind, the other things that we do have that are playing well for us is there's literally nothing we can't put that this thing isn't going to cut through. It's literally got all of the ABCs of cutting: alcohol, bitterness, carbonation, has all of those in spades. And it's got anything you want to bridge with or complement. I mean, it's going to be hard. You're going to be hard pressed to. You have to kind of try and choose something to really. Might be a harder exercise to figure out what's not going to complement with this, as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah, this it seems like such a perfect test the pitfalls kind of food pairing beer, right? You've said it's got all this stuff going on, so the intensity is quite high. And among all the individual things that you have to watch out for, it's like make sure also that the interaction that you expect to occur with such a complex beer actually occurs and
Right.
doesn't just either cancel out in a negative way or compound in a negative way. Um, and just because you have a complex beer too, there's sometimes there's a beautiful simplicity in pairing something that's intense but a little less complex, right?
Right.
It might be an intense dish but play one or two notes really, really strongly, instead of an extremely complex dish. Because in my experience, you kind of add complexity onto complexity, and that compounds in a non-linear way, right? It's just like, oh my gosh, there's so much going on, and it's
Right.
cool. But what was the lesson here? What did we make something that was better or not? And you can definitely thread that needle, but it's a much more difficult needle to thread in my experience and opinion. I The kind of singular ingredient that I was intrigued by. I have a couple of savory dishes, but the singular ingredient I was intrigued by was the kind of like earthy and natural sweetness of carrots. I think would be a good match to this. And so my initial thought was that this would be really good with a fairly traditional gnocchi that had like a brown butter and sage kind of sauce. I think would be really nice. And then I was like, oh, let's kick it up a notch, or just link in another angle, and let's make a carrot gnocchi, which I've had before. And so you're just making potato gnocchi like normal, but you puree down some carrots, gives them that little bit of extra earthiness, a little bit of sweetness, But again, it's a natural sweetness and a cool color, you know. And let's toss that in a pesto sauce, but we can make a pesto out of the carrot tops. You know, you don't forget to use all your parts of your carrot, and that making pesto that way is more bitter than like a basil pesto, but I think it's not so bitter and it's not a nondescript bitterness that I hope that wouldn't be a compounding problem. We've already got this really pleasant long bitter linger, and so I hope that would incorporate well into that. But if you're also making it with, a wreck of butter and getting a really creamy um, kind of texture going on as well, then there's a lot of other things saving you from extreme bitterness as well. So I think you could do the brown butter sage gnocchi, which would be really nice. But I would I want to investigate that carrot angle. Carrot gnocchi with a carrot top pesto sauce, I think would be really fun. How about you for something kind of for dinner?
Yeah, I had something interesting, but I think there's just a little bit too much kind of going on with it. I think there's and I well I think one thing to do is to talk about this, what I had, and then we can kind of talk through what
Yeah,
some of the potential pitfalls would have been. And then surprisingly enough, I actually think what I had for lunch today would be quite interesting. So why don't we kind of work this exercise here? And maybe I've kind of been thinking about it a little bit as you've been sharing your piece. So if you want to kind of tackle it first, and then I can share any thoughts that I have. But I was looking at thinking about swordfish, kind of like what Ublon was going with, like just kind of figuring out some sort of fish. And then trying to figure out, is the malt character going to be intense enough where we need to pan fry it, or is it just going to be kind of a really light kind of doughy thing where we just kind of want to bake it and we don't really want to have a ton of Maillard character. But as you said, this could very easily be some pale malt. This does not look like something like Duvel, that clearly is just like 100% Pilsner malt and then like, sugar to get to the higher gravity where it's like straw in color.
right.
But really the thing that I was moving towards was how to play with spices or toppings on that are going to um, both not work so much to play into where you're getting too many, because too many phenolics, like you said, if there's spices and phenolics and there's too much, it just becomes a little bit of a clash. And so how do we play with spices that are maybe a little bit more either savory, which kind of led me to the dish I had for lunch, or ones that could kind of maybe have a natural fruitiness to them to maybe kind of do double duty.
Mm,
But the first one I thought of was like a pan fried, pan seared swordfish, and then like a za'atar spice blend, which would be cumin, salt, sesame seed, oregano, and sumac. Sumac is the kind of playing with that, sort of more savory citrus one. I think that one could be okay.
yeah.
I don't think that one's too bad. I think the other option that I had, Turkish baccarat, where you have pepper, cumin, coriander, clove, cardamom, nutmeg, cinnamon, and spearmint. I think that is over the top. I think that's the
Yeah.
one that where you could potentially run in, like, you would need, in my opinion, you would need to switch out some of those um, for some different spices, or just something else different that's going to play to the fruit character.
Yeah, and remind me the dish that you were having these spice blends with that you were thinking of, or were you just thinking from the
A
spice blend angle first?
pan-seared swordfish, just trying to pick kind of like a
Oh, that's right.
neutral-ish, fish that can take on a lot of spice.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think you could. I really like the za'atar angle, and fit. Some people might think that a whitefish or something is too light for this, but their website's instructive. Where if you're making everything else that goes with it very unctuous and buttery and saucy and delicious, then you're increasing the intensity of the fish too, right? Um, yeah, you dodged one of the angles that I think is a pitfall with the spice on spice, because it's not just a simple math problem, right? It's not like, oh, I'm getting five spice notes from the beer, so I need to add fewer than five to the dish or something like that. It's a little bit
Yeah,
more about what the combinations are, where the
yeah,
intensities lie, and some people recommend Belgian beers in particular, but beers like this with Indian food, which has a ton of spices in it. And for me, I think that's kind of a pitfall in one respect, which is you've got so much spice character, and the way that Indian food cooks with the synergy of 11, 12, 15 spices, it's really diffused throughout the dish. It's not like an accompaniment, right? It's the dish is
Mm,
meant to taste like that kind of mega combination of spices. And I
yeah.
think that runs into complexity problems that is just like we've said, is just like it's just pepper on cumin on whatever. But if your spice blend is a little bit more simple and is not integrated into something like a curry, for example, it's either, you kind of have like a spiced protein, or a cream sauce with some of those spices in it. I think that that's a gentle way of incorporating a lot of spice character, and I like that za'atar angle because that's also not a combination that is too like the spice character of the beer as well.
Mm, yeah.
There's kind of obviously there can be a little bit of clove cumin type confusion. Those are both in a similar vein or whatever, but I love where your head's at. That sumac angle is really, really nice. And that's the same kind of area my head was in with some of that earthy character too. Um, so yeah, I like that. And I like the Zatar more than the other idea. But yeah, that seems really nice to me.
Yeah, I think the other thing too to remind folks of is if you do really look up some of these, what some of these spices are made of. It's kind of like you said. There's different spices that present differently, and so there's floral spices, there's savory spices, there's fruity spices. There's ones that are mainly for like to build kind of like capsaicin. There's all different kinds. Some of them are mix into both. Marjoram is a big, is a combination. It's kind of got that savoriness of oregano, but also kind of that citrus-like character along with it. So there's some that kind of play, a couple of different roles. And so the thing is you don't want to just have one of those things playing into the spice character, because if you just have a lot of really floral spices in something like this, like it's probably just going to remind you of like soap or like perfume or something like that.
Yeah, or
And
like
so
a
that's where you
candle
kind of
or
run.
something.
Right, exactly. Just it's gonna all of a sudden just be all these very artificial things that are literally like you mentioned, like that's what you use to make a candle. Like you use like
Hmm.
lavender and all these other things, and that's what you. But you don't see a lot of um, cardamom or clove based or sumac based candles, because
Yeah,
that's not really
yeah.
the savory candle aisle did not work out in the pilot testing. I would assume.
Well,
So
and that's a really good lesson too, from the sense that there, I don't know whether it's just sort of like a natural inclination with the kind of cultural way that different people make their spice blends or work on spicing dishes, but there's kind of a whole class of spices that need helper spices, right? It's kind of like
yeah,
hops. There are some that you wouldn't really brew a single hop beer with some hops, right? They're just better in combination with some other ones to layer in some higher level notes. And I think that spices can work a lot like that too. Not everything is salt and pepper, which you know change the world, and that just
right.
goes with everything. But there are, for example, there aren't a lot of dishes or sauces or things like that are just cumin, and only,
Right.
I like kind of Mexican frijoles might be kind of the closest, but even then they're putting in some oregano, and some other things. So that cumin as kind of like a base to layer in other spices makes a lot of sense, from the perspective of building spice complexity without building spice confusion, right? You don't want people to
Yes.
have this dish and the food pairing and be like, what the am I is happening?
Yeah.
You want to have some like identifiable benefits to what's going on, and that's a good way to think about it. Think about it less as, or think about it more as layering in complexity and avoiding confusion. You want people to taste what you envisioned, and I
Yeah.
think Zaatar swordfish does that.
Absolutely. And then if you're, with this kind of, with this kind of beer, if you feel like the malt character is a little bit more refined, a little bit higher up, sort of on that scale of the of Maillard character, I would say you'd be just fine to bump this up to chicken
Yeah,
with Sitar. If you think it's there and it's not just like, wow, this is just like Pilsner malt with some sugar, and it's just really, there's adjuncts to boost it, and kind of you're just getting this really, it's just really dry, and it's just really not having a whole lot of complexity. Then you just play with the protein.
yeah, yep. You can. This beer definitely has the flexibility to play with the protein, right?
I
It's
agree.
got, it could just be, even though it's such a big beer, 9%, it's not a dark beer, so you're not getting any
Mhm.
really Maillard roasted, chocolatey, nothing like that. And so, where we think of those types of roasted or darkly kilned malts as a great complement to darker proteins, more intense proteins, this doesn't have that power, but it's one of my favorite confusions that I do as well, but people um, do in beer all the time is they only call dark beers malty, right? Like this beer's malty, and it's like, well, if if it's an all malt beer that's the same alcohol percentage, it doesn't matter what the color is. They're kind of equally malty, right? You just have to
Right.
pick out what the actual malt
Yeah.
flavors are.
Right.
But the source of the fermentables was the same, so they're both malty. They're malt beverages,
Yep.
and this provides an opportunity to have like a kind of a really deep malt character that has some lighter, brighter notes, some lighter bread character, some crackery character, but all wrapped up in a 9% package where you could have. This all ties back into flexibility of your protein, which is you could get away with some lighter ones that are built that are made with a more unctuous sauce or something else more intense accompanying it, or a kind of a heavier, more intense protein. And this is almost like your squeeze of citrus over it to just kind of like brighten the dish, or your just hit of acid a little bit to kind of do some internal cutting with a lot of that really, really just big umami that's going on. So
Absolutely. All right. Before we get to dessert, as I said in the last episode, since we're studying for Master Cicerone, I think it would just be, because one thing we've noticed is that we just have accumulated so many, so many beer and food pairings over all the episodes that we've done. And I think and for Master, you have to focus on cheese. So a couple that I came up with, there's a goat cheese from Vermont Creamy called, gosh, Bonne, Bonnie, and then Bouche, Boucher. But it's a goat cheese. They say it has notes of milk, Meyer lemon. It's got a creamy texture, leading to a really good contrast. Some bread dough notes. So I think that's kind of where you've got kind of a really good, if you're kind of just looking for your contrast to be your texture, and then lots of complements in the flavor and aroma, you can go there. But then I think if you're maybe trying to play with something that's a little bit more, kind of a little bit more of a contrast in flavor, maybe go for something like a meteor, kind of Taleggio type of cheese,
mm,
something that's kind of medium intensity, that kind of leans more into like just kind of like you're just having some prosciutto. Basically, there's some medium intensity Taleggios that kind of have that impression. So those are a couple that I did some research on today as well. But what about dessert? Dessert is really going to be the challenge here. That's what we probably should have said at the beginning. This beer is going to be a challenge with dessert.
yeah, because a lot of our safe havens for pale lighter beers is where I want to gravitate toward here as well. But you warned us all at the beginning of the episode, which is just you sort of have three components in this beer that are cranked to 11.
Yeah.
You've got the alcohol components that run into problems with high levels of sweetness in particular. And so I'm gonna kind of try to violate it creatively a little bit. I want to see if this would work because like this has such a dense lemon and citrus
Yeah.
oil character to it that I want to play with that. And even if I'm left with a big bitterness, so we kind of started there anyway. So hopefully that won't be too unbecoming. But I want to do pound cake, lemon pound cake, and I want the little, sometimes there's just a really simple icing over the pound cake, and I want to do a ginger version. You could grate
Yeah.
ginger into it as well, into the pound cake as well. But I think even just lemon pound cake with keep the ginger on that little bit of icing, and the icing is, it's sweet, but it's on a fraction of the pound cake, right? If you're thinking of
That
a,
was exactly
you know,
exactly what I was gonna say. Yeah, it's not like there's like
yeah,
three layers of frosting along with three layers of pound cake. That's the difference, right?
yeah, yeah, and it kind of, um, what it tastes like to me when you have a pound cake like that with that little bit of icing is like, particularly if there's ginger or lemon, is like a candied lemon peel or a candied ginger. It kind of starts to bring that into the discussion without having a hard candy at the table. And I think that this could be really nice with that because, pound cake's not light, obviously. It's got this dense breadiness to it, and it is sweet, but it's kind of like a little bit of a dense cakey sweetness, not super. Um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like confectionery
Hmm.
sweetness. And I think ginger is a really great natural complement to both the ester character and the phenolic character in the beer. I think that that's going to be, even if you made it quite gingery, the way that you can get kind of like a nasally
Yeah.
ginger soda, you'd be well within your rights to do so because it would just, it's sort of like a way to light up the sinuses without going the capsaicin route. Which I think if you had something
Mm,
super spicy with this beer,
mm,
you'd be feeling it
yeah.
pretty tough. So yeah, that was my idea, and I think it could work, even though that type of dessert is kind of heavy. But you just have the one slice; it's just got a little bit of icing, and it would almost be like turning old school American IPAs, particularly East Coast ones that had a good dash of caramel malt to them, and those
Mm.
have like a candied hop flavor to them. They really bend that hop character sweet. And that's kind of the interaction that I would be going for. You don't have the caramel note, but you have sweetness plus hop character in a way that
Hmm.
I would want it to be like having hop candies. So that would be my hope. How about you?
I took your because I thought of earthiness with this too. I was like, you can't really go too hot. You can't go too floral. You can't go too sweet. You can't go too much. You can't go too much fruit because then it might just start being a lot of matching. And one thing that I found that I really like in desserts with, especially with like saison or lots of really dry and really high phenolic beers, is matcha. So I went with white chocolate matcha
Oh,
cookies. That was my route because in a lot of beer, cheese, and chocolate pairings that I've done, white chocolate is actually not too bad with American IPA. It's not the worst canvas in the world, and
hmm
I think for this particular flavor profile, I don't know if you necessarily want a darker chocolate. I don't think you want a bunch of bitterness. I don't think you want a bunch of sweetness. And so I think white chocolate is a good enough canvas and neutral enough, but still has a little bit of flavor going on. You could also maybe play with the white chocolate too. You could maybe play with one that has a little bit of vanilla in there, which is going to just give you kind of an impression of sweetness rather than an actual sweetness that might clash with the bitterness. Because I think that it wouldn't be sweet enough where you're going to maybe potentially get a nice contrast of some kind. So I think you could maybe play with the kind of white chocolate that you use in there too, and get something fun. But that's kind of the base that I went with, trying to throw in something earthy because that's kind of to me what was missing, just like what you said with your carrot gnocchi suggestion
Yeah,
at the top.
that sounds yummy. That I wish I would have thought of matcha. That seems like a really really natural pairing. And if you've ever had matcha by itself, like just an unsweetened matcha tea or something, it's quite bitter, quite earthy, and particularly in Japan and kind of other East Asian areas, they do use a lot of matcha in different dessert, cookie, type type recipes and presentations too. So I like that. And you got to go white chocolate, right? If you go, this is just would be a tough slog with any other kind of chocolate because anytime you're bringing in that roasted bitterness as well, like a roasted cacao type bitterness, even on the milkiest of dark milk chocolates, that that might be tough. But yeah,
That was
white
one.
chocolate
Yeah,
as a
that
canvas, that's great.
the chocolate. Yeah, the chocolate one was just mostly from. That was mostly just drawing from experience. I've tried all kinds of chocolate with high bitterness beers, with old school, West Coast IPAs, New England IPA. And I think this, I haven't tried it with Belgian IPA, but I have a feeling this would be somewhat similar. So,
Well, we've talked about it off mic before. I don't know if we ever have on the show, but a note that I get from Belgian triples a lot is a kind of a vanilla or a marshmallow note. It's like something with that
mm,
candy sugar style sweetness with that big carbonation makes it almost kind of like fluffy. And it's not to say that they're like taste super sweet or anything, but the white chocolate idea can kind of like thread that into here and almost give you some of that
mm,
reminiscent Belgian triple style note too. I like
yeah,
that.
that's a fun play there. Maybe get that little flavor impression. I like that. Excellent. Okay, that was good. I liked it. I like
That was
those plays.
delicious.
Those
Delicious
are some good
episode.
ones. Yeah. Um, we've got a special episode next week. As we've said before, even though it is episode 17 next week, it's really going to be like episode 52 for us. So it's really our 1 year anniversary. So thankfully, we have a really good friend who hooked us up with some great beer. So it's going to be from the brewery, the like brewery spelled Bruery, and it's called Petite Mardi. It's kind of a play on like a wine beer, not necessarily a hybrid, but some lots of wine ingredients included. I think there was some co-fermentation going on in there. I asked Asher, who's one of the brewers and the barrel room manager at the brewery, for the recipe information. So it's going to be super specific. He gave us all the info on that, so that's gonna be awesome. So find something like that if you know place. I know Jester King has played a lot with some wine beer hybrid stuff, but it's just becoming really popular. I know side project Corey King came from the wine world, and so he's just brought everything he knows from there in terms of flavor profile and barrel aging and all that kind of stuff. And so he's just used all of that to his advantage, and they make amazing beer that's wine hybrid or adjacent or whatever you want to call it. So I feel like it's still available enough where hopefully you can find something, kind of a specialty beer like that, within the time frame here.
Yeah, and while I haven't had that beer yet, I'm very excited to get to it. It's kind of, from what I know, it's like a wine stout hybrid almost.
Mm-hmm.
So those seem a little bit more rare than some beers that just use wine grapes or grape juice or whatever in a co-ferment. But so if you can't find a kind of stout wine hybrid kind of beer, then grab something else or just join us anyway. It'll be so fun.
Yeah, I mean it's a special week, so just even if you can just grab a special beer, that'll do. That'll do just fine as well. Um, Make sure to Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to like the video. Make sure to subscribe. Cheers, everybody, and we will see you
Cheers.
next time. Thanks for tuning in.